Hi, this is Civil Discourse Now. This is second time I've done this today. It's July 25th, 2022. I'm Mark Small. I was reading online some people from my high school class where one came on and said, I don't care what anybody says. This country is a Christian country, and I'm going to say it right now. And it's like, no. Because he was trying to say how the Declaration of Independence uses God and everything like that. So let's back up. Realize that when we're talking about the people who founded the country, that's different from the people who wrote the documents. Now, there's a reason to be all legal about this because it's law, okay? So if you're looking at the founders of this country, that includes everybody that was here. It wasn't just the documents. The people who were here, part of this culture, this society, people who were put down in slavery, people who were living here that we shoved off the land, they're founders too. They're part of this country today. You can't say, well, they weren't then. We want them now. We like their casinos. No. You can't do that. So the framers, the Library of Congress defines them as being the 55 delegates at the Constitutional Convention who were there at one time or another from the beginning all the way to the end. They framed a government. They drew up what they viewed as like the framework of a government, not the final thing, because the details would be filled in later. So those are the framers. That's how they viewed what they were doing. You might say, well, they really had that kind of a long-term view. Yeah, and they were also impatient. They'd been there 3.5 months. A lot of them had businesses at home, and they were a long ways from home. And they want to make sure they got business done and stuff, but they also wanted a new government. And the Constitution was written outside of the charter that was given it by the Congress. But that's another story. But those are the framers. Those were 55 people who wrote the Constitution. It was later ratified, amendments added. Okay, now who are the founders? The founders, and this becomes important when you talk about religion, because 7%, 8% of the country population consisted of white male landowners who weren't Jewish or the Islamic faith. And usually Catholics were kind of excluded, but depended upon what colony. So you're talking about 7%, maybe, the population really had a say in things. That's important because if you're going to say, well, when they wrote these documents, it meant something. No. This forced on a lot of people. If you're going to say this is a Christian country from the beginning, what about all the people who are living here? What their own beliefs, their own religions, their view of the land. I was talking to a person who contends that he has a master's degree in history. He said, well, when they came to these shores, they looked out and there was nothing here. That's right. They didn't consider the people who lived here to be humans. The Constitution doesn't really talk about the indigenous peoples. So there are people here. Slaves are at least given 3/5 of the value of a human being. That's terrible. It's horrific. But it's more than what the people who occupied the lands here were given. And women didn't have any rights, really. They couldn't vote, couldn't enter a contract, had to get husband's permission for virtually anything. So if you're going to say that there's some kind of controlling condition because you had 5 to 7% of the population that was gung-ho about something, even then you don't have it. A lot of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention were deists. Aldous Huxley later coined the term agnostic. He wasn't born yet, but that might have applied to a lot of the people who were deists. They believed in a general concept of a God. So to sit there and say, well, they were Christian, no, they weren't. A lot of them weren't. Some of them were. They were afraid of what Christianity had done. They saw what it had done in Europe. There had been wars, bloody wars. So that's why you can't sit there and say, well, the founders and the framers wanted this to be a Christian country. No, they didn't. So read history. Now, what do we have today? There's about 17% of the population that's evangelical, and they're losing numbers all the time. They're saying, well, no, we have to go back to those early days when this was a God-fearing country. No, that's absurd. They don't have it then. They don't have it now, because today so many more people have rights. And this is a country that was founded upon principle of separation of church and state. That's what we've gotten to. Now, if you're going to force your views on everybody else, then that's something that I think kind of goes against the principles upon which the country was founded. Also, it kind of like makes me say, as I have on here, if you believe that your God runs things and that this should be a theocracy, then prove your God exists. Because you're putting that in play. Otherwise, we have to have a respect for people's beliefs. And that means they believe in God or they don't. We have to cooperate. We have to work in this culture, in this country. I'm Mark Swall, Civil Discourse Now. My second part today was peace, love, happiness, freedom, nanu, nanu. Take care. It's kind of fun.